What is this? What is this? What is this? There you go. You must work for your meal. What is it? What is it? What is it? Are you going to win your breakfast? Are you going to win it? Come on then. That's your breakfast. That's your breakfast. Can't make it easy. Will she get it? And there she goes. Well done. Well done. Well done. Good girl.
Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. It's Monday. It's Monday. I'm not sure how I feel about it because it's the first Monday here in the UK, for this area of the country anyway, it's the first day that the schools are back open. Well, most of the schools. So yes, Mrs. Harsh is back in work today. I'm not sure if she's going to be approachable when she gets home. We'll see how that goes. See how it goes. And if you don't see me again, you'll know it didn't go well. Anyway, you're looking amazing for a Monday morning. The weekend must have been good to you. But anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes, as this is video one of two. At the moment, as there will eventually be two videos today. Anyway, let's crack on as we talk about Bryan Kohberger and the fact that a lot of people have reached out. A lot of people constantly reach out. A lot of people are massively invested in this case. It's one of those cases where people think there's not a lot to talk about. They think that we should perhaps leave it and wait till the trial and look. To a degree, I agree, because there isn't a massive amount of new information coming out. But there are still people who are massively invested in the Idaho 4 case. And why they're invested is because you've got two parties, and we talk about these two parties. It's the people who feel that what the public have been given access to is enough for them to say, look, they've got the right guy. They've got the right guy, and we've just got to wait now until the procedure finds him guilty, and this is a done deal. And then you've got the other party of people who they're not at that stage yet. And then you've got a situation where people who are not agreeing with the Bryan Kohberger is guilty people, they're shown or thought of as conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat people. So I thought, for those of you who are firmly Bryan Kohberger is guilty, I thought I would give you some questions that you can comment down below. And I do this occasionally, and I never really find people who are brave enough to explain. So I'm going to ask a few questions and point to a few things that I feel need to be addressed. What would have to be proven to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Bryan Kohberger was indeed the person who did this crime and did it on his own? Because let's make no bones about it, as I've said recently, this case isn't about proving that Bryan Kohberger was driving around Moscow, Idaho on the night that this crime happened. It ain't about that. It's proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Bryan Kohberger entered the home and did the crime itself. Did the crime itself. He was the person who did it, not the person who was just happened to be driving around at the time and sadly got himself in a position that would lead him to be a prime suspect. So question number one, do you believe that in a case like this, there has never been someone who was found to be a prime suspect in a murder case and even charged for that murder, and it later turns out that it wasn't them? Because I can tell you you're wrong. It's happened multiple times. Multiple times people have been accused and been charged with murder and other crimes, other heinous crimes, and even done years and years of time in prison and jails, and it turns out later that they were wrongfully convicted. And this just could be one of those situations where Bryan Kohberger was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had no solid alibi to say that, look, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, and and the rest is history. And now the system has to go down the route it's going, and hopefully not be a statistic where we either see an innocent man convicted or alternatively a guilty man let free. Because at the moment, as it stands, both of these things are potentials. Next thing, Bryan Kohberger's car. Explain to me fully how, given the time constraints of when this crime actually took place, the duration of time that Bryan Kohberger would have had inside the property, factoring in that he was apparently seen by a witness and what the witness has said about the person she saw, how is it that nothing was found in the car? Nothing at all, despite the fact that multiple professionals in law enforcement had said that the car would be the thing that would hang him or get him shot. Why was there nothing found in there? And not only nothing found in there, but no evidence of cleaning. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing. And I know people have turned around and they've said, look, he had a lot of time to get his ducks in a row. He's got a lot of time to sort things out. Which, to a degree, is right. There was a few weeks before he was arrested, certainly. We don't 100% know how long there was between the crime happening and law enforcement, the FBI, actually honing in and watching Bryan Kohberger's movements. And we know during that period of time as well, there was a period where they completely lost him. They didn't even know where he was. So, look, I'm not completely ignorant, but the fact that the car had nothing in it would lead me to believe that if he drove the car there, then he must have had to have prepped that car within an inch of its life, which still would have meant that he then would have had to have entered into the car, factoring in the fact it was prepped, who perhaps didn't prep himself because he felt he didn't need to, which still leaves a risk of putting DNA somewhere, which in my eyes would have still lent him in the direction that he would have felt that he needed to clean just to make sure. Just to make sure. Tell me why. No evidence of cleaning, no evidence of DNA, no nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Next question. The knife sheath. The sheath itself in the house. The smoking gun, so to speak. Do you genuinely feel that it's beyond the realms of possibility that that knife sheath could have been planted, could have been put in there? If you truly believe that there's not a chance in hell that that is the case, not at all, not at all, how is it that we have 3 other unidentified male DNA samples that the same amount of work wasn't put in to ascertain who they were? Why was it only the knife sheath itself that the attention was paid to? And furthermore, how do you know that the murder weapon itself was in fact a K-bar knife, when you factor in what Kathy Mabbott had stated about the injuries and what family members of the victims had also said about the injuries, which heavily lent towards the fact that there could have potentially been multiple weapons? Look, also, Ann Taylor states there is no connection whatsoever. No connection whatsoever between Bryan Kohberger and the victims. So she's alluding to the fact that there's potentially no connection digitally whatsoever. So there was no online stalker. There was none of that. So what was the connection? What was the connection there? Because there must have been a connection. And I'll tell you for why there must have been a connection. Because Bryan Kohberger must have known who was in that house that night. He must have. Without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, he must have known who was in there and who was not in there. Because nobody's going to walk into that house armed with just a K-bar knife, if you want to go down that route, with the risk of walking into a house with 20 people in it. 20 people could have been in that house. Furthermore, how did he genuinely know that the door was unlocked? How did he know that the individual doors inside the property weren't locked? How is that? How is any of this possible? How is any of it possible that he would... Because in my mind, if he hadn't been in that property, if he hadn't had prior knowledge of what was going on in that property, even based on his own property and the fact that his own property had locks on it and locks on the doors, fact that he had one room and he didn't have access to another room and that was locked, his mind should have been that he's going to enter into a house and have to deal with locked doors. I don't understand it. I don't understand, and I want you to explain to me. Do you genuinely think that Bryan Kohberger entered into this house not knowing anything about it? Not knowing anything about it whatsoever? And if he did know things about it, how did he know? How did he know that the doors would be unlocked? How did he know who was in there? How did he know who wasn't in there? Based on how many cars were outside, how did he know what he did? Look, I'm not completely naive to believe that Bryan Kohberger couldn't have been the person who did it. But I've said countless times that for me, Bryan Kohberger, this whole crime, it seems to me that he is just part of a bigger picture. Someone must have told him what was going on in that house, or he's been in that house before. Been in there, knew about it, knew that the locks weren't on the doors, or knew that there was locks on the doors, but they weren't generally locked. He knew he could go in the door with which he entered into the house. He knew that that would be unlocked. And how? It's all these hows. How did he know what he knew? And I want you to tell me how all this can be explained without implicating somebody else as someone who would have helped him. Also, another question. With the Bryan Kohberger situation on the peripheral, are you genuinely telling me it's beyond a reasonable doubt to say that Bryan Kohberger had nothing whatsoever to do with the Idaho 4 case? Nothing at all. This just happened to be around the same time that all this was kicking off with Bryan Kohberger and the Idaho 4, that Bryan Kohberger was going through what he was going through. Something with his PTSD. You know, the guy was a hero. I'm not taking away the guy was a hero. What I struggle with is something was going on with Bryan Kohberger. Something had escalated. Something had triggered that whatever happened there. And that is still being investigated to this day. It's not a closed investigation. It's just not. Tell me that you couldn't, that Ann Taylor, someone with Ann Taylor's skill, could not put enough doubt into a jury's mind just asking about the unidentified DNA. This ex-military, this very skilled killer was just down the road, where Bryan Kohberger himself had apparently come from. He's been killed by SWAT after himself apparently threatening to kill his own roommates. Again, I can't stress enough. This isn't just about proving Bryan Kohberger entered into Moscow, Idaho on this night and drove around. This is about proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he entered the house and he did the crime. Now, when you've got the situation with Bryan Kohberger, where Bryan Kohberger's own friend explains and has gone publicly about his love of knives, love of machete, collected bladed weapons. And he lived on the same campus, the same area as Bryan Kohberger. Is it not beyond a reasonable doubt that Bryan Kohberger, Brent Kohberger came into contact with one another? The DNA was transferred from Bryan Kohberger to Brent Kohberger to a knife sheath, and a knife sheath that just happened to end up in a house. And the rest is history. And all I'm trying to say here is I'm not trying to say that anybody is involved. What I'm trying to do is factor in what is going to happen in this courtroom and the questions that could potentially get put to the jury, and the jury are going to have to make a decision beyond a reasonable doubt. What have you genuinely seen in the public eye now that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Bryan Kohberger is the guy who did it? And not only was he just driving around, he entered into the house and he did the crime. He did the crime, he did it in the time with which it's been said that he did it. He's come out and he's managed to cover all of his tracks. But yet, on the flip side of that coin, he drove his own car, he fucked up with his own phone, drove around, got caught on camera, left a witness, left a knife sheath at the scene. None of it makes sense. None of it makes sense to me. But again, I want you to answer these questions. Please. Because I'm at a loss with it. I'll catch you all in video 2 later.